I'm Alicia Blumross. I lead the youth safety product team in trust and safety at TikTok. I'm super excited to be here. I've known Liz for a long time.
And she was an
Ages us both.
academic.
Yes. So a former life as an academic researcher, have spent a lot of time talking with teenagers, parents, younger children about kind of life in the digital age and how families are negotiating all of these challenges and opportunities. So excited to be here.
Thanks, Alicia.
Hello, I'm Melissa Fausz. I lead state and local government affairs and public policy for YouTube. So I've been in the state government affairs space for over a decade now, and I've been on the YouTube team since last year. This is my first Connect Safely event, so I'm super excited to be here, but looking forward to the conversation.
I'm Nicole Lopez. I'm with Meta, and I oversee youth safety policy at the company. I am a former lawyer, but I guess always a lawyer. I'm a former prosecutor, and I've been working on child safety issues for the bulk of my career. I also am excited to be here because backstory, I know Alicia and I met going into high school, and we were both outspoken teens who cared deeply about advocacy. And so it really warms my heart to be here with teens. And I see a lot of myself in the teens that I've been meeting. So thanks for having me here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aleeza. I'm part of the Youth Advisory Committee for the California Partners Project. I consider myself to be one of those current teens who's very passionate about advocacy, and I'm just really excited to be here and share my opinions.
Hi, my name is Teitelbaum. I'm a freshman at UC Berkeley studying political economy, and I'm also on the ConnectSafely Youth Advisory Committee.
Hi, everyone. Assemblyman Josh Hoover, second year assembly member representing Sacramento County in District 7, former school board member, parent of 3 as well, and also the author of the Phone Free Schools Act, which is something that I've been advocating for and will be continuing to work on this year. I saw this table was chatting about that and those policies. So, but really excited to be here and chat with everyone.
Thank you so much. So I spent many years with CBS Radio doing sound bites where I learned to give a network a report in 12 seconds. You guys can have a little more than that, but we do need to keep our comments very short. The first question is for the adults in the room. Although Nate, I know technically you guys, some are adults, but the tech folks and also, of course, Assemblyman Hoover. And that has to do with the fact that tech is always changing. I mean, when we started Connect Safely, we were worried about predators. We were barely worried about cyberbullying. We were worried about, content. And now we have a whole different set of things that we're concerned about. Generative AI is just the latest of many. How do you guys, as tech execs and as a policymaker, deal with the fact that there's such a changing landscape? Alicia, why don't we start with you?
I think the landscape is changing. There's also a lot of commonalities. One of the things that I think is so helpful as a tech company is to look to guidance and frameworks that are relevant to all companies, including things like legacy media or streaming. So sometimes we talk about the 4 C's, which is the content that young people are engaging with, contact, so who they have talked to, who has access to them, conduct, so what are the things that young people themselves are doing, experiencing, thinking about, and then finally contract, which has everything to do with like advertising, data collection, influencer marketing, things like that. So those 4 categories are kind of like an international framework that can be used for risk assessment, can be used to help us design programs. And I think for probably 10 plus years. And though the details of how those things change a ton with things like generative AI totally changes how we think about content, but I think categories are pretty evergreen. So I take a lot of inspiration from that. And also it really helps when I'm advising internally to kind of connect the advice that I'm giving to these international frameworks so that, product teams really understand, hey, that we at TikTok are not alone in asking these questions and thinking about how we can do better across all 4 of those categories. Sorry, that was probably the second clarity.
We'll forgive you this time. Think of it as a TikTok video. I should have given you 15 seconds. Anybody else want to chime in?
Well, I was just going to say, it's important. Obviously, my dad actually worked for Apple. So growing up, I was a big Apple fan. And then when Steve Jobs launched the iPhone in 2007, it was this groundbreaking technology. But it's really important as policymakers, as we get these revolutionary new technologies, to continue to follow the research and the science following that. At the time, we didn't realize what that would necessarily bring. And I think it's important that we're constantly looking at how, these platforms and these devices are really impacting particularly young people and their development and their social engagement. And so that's kind of what we're looking at as policymakers.
I can add a blurb,
ahead,
Larry,
please.
too. I was just building on what Alicia said. I also think bringing others in and bringing in a diversity of voices is really critical. For example, we bring Connect Safely in terms of working with experts to get ahead of the trends that we're seeing. And I think cross-industry collaboration is also really important with the shifts in technology. And we do a pretty good job, I think, at connecting the dots and making sure that we bring the right people in to inform all of the product decisions and also policy-related decisions that we make.
You thoughts before we get to one of the teen questions? Okay. So for the teenagers in the room, there's a lot of things that are being talked about by folks like that are sitting with you. For example, the whole issue of cell phone bans in school, which is going to have an impact on you. Maybe good, maybe bad. I don't know, but it's an impact on you guys. Or decisions that may come down to require parental controls. Australia just outlawed social media for people under 16. I don't think that's on the table, but certainly there could be parental permission required for young people to be using social media. I'm wondering how you feel in general about these types of policies and what you think young people's role should be in helping to formulate these policies.
Sure. So I'm currently a sophomore in high school, and I think one of the main concerns that kids my age that I see have with the restriction of social media is that for a lot of us, our entire lives are online. And I think the amount of a role that social media tends to play in the way that we interact socially is something that I find a lot of adults don't understand, because in a lot of ways, it's not an isolating factor. It can be, but it also creates the basis for a lot of our in-person relationships. So I interact with a lot of my friends who I don't get to see every day by sending them Instagram reels back and forth. And so a lot of the influence that social media has on our lives isn't inherently negative. So to say that we need to restrict all phone use at schools all day, or to say that we need to ban social media for kids under 16, I feel generalizes a lot of the really complex and nuanced relationship that we have with social media. And so that's why I think it's so important to have teen voices when these conversations are being had, because the impact that social media has on our lives can't be understated.
Yeah, I mean, wow, that really summed it up pretty well. I think a really important thing is encouraging encouraging parents to interact with their kids in deciding a lot of these policies, especially at home, especially with parental controls. I mean, for me personally, a lot of these, my parents never imposed many of the actual tech controls on my apps or my iPhone, but we had some rules in our house, and through those rules, I developed my own skills at moderating myself. So, for example, last year I was really I was struggling to study well when I had my phone. So because I had developed these skills of my self-moderation, I was able to put my phone away. I deleted some apps that I was just using way too much. And I was able to focus on myself. So I think really building these skills that kids can develop themselves, if they can build these skills for themselves, it'll help them once they go into college and the real world, real world outside of their home.
Thank you. Companies that are here, Meta, YouTube, TikTok, have publicly talked a lot about their parental controls and their various tools, and less about the specifics of what you do. And we can mention those. Talk a little bit about why you do that. What is it that's behind, for example, I know TikTok, you have, I can't recall, timeout tools and the various tools you guys have in place. And I know you don't have time to go through every tool, but just briefly go through some of them and talk a little bit about why you do them and what do you think is the advantage of them?
So I think I want to talk about two different things we do in the product, and they're both related to each other. So one is our family pairing tool, which enables a parent and a teen to link their account really easily actually through just scanning a kind of a QR code, and then the accounts become linked. And then once you have family pairing set up, you can do different kinds of things as a parent. You can set time limits and away times. Notifications are already off by default overnight, but parents can adjust those settings beyond that. And I think that and additional kind of like screen time break reminders, there's a dashboard and so on. But in addition to that, we also have a lot of those same defaults and product settings that are on by default for teenagers, even if they don't have a parent to supervise. So it's important, I think, to take both of those tactics. We realize that families are very, very different in terms of the amount of time that they have available to supervise, the amount of detail that they want to get into. So we make those tools available that work for a diverse range of families, but we also really need to make sure that there's a backstop for young people who don't have parents available or engaged to use those kinds of tools. So actually, TikTok doesn't allow DMs for under 16s, for example. You can't live stream if you're under 18. Your account is private by default if you're under 16, and you actually can't make it fully public. So again, we want to make those tools for parents who really do have the interest and ability to get involved, but also need to make sure that the defaults for teenagers are safe, even if they don't have those parents available and engaged.
Yeah, so for YouTube, the way that we really approach it and think about crafting user experiences that really meet the needs of our younger users is that a kid under the age of 9, a preteen, and a teenager have very different needs and experiences and desires of what they're going to try and get out of YouTube. So we've tried to craft tools that help parents and kids manage their YouTube usage together in a way that makes sense developmentally for whatever age that they're at. So we have a couple key features that kind of meet the needs for each of these kind of separate groups. We have our YouTube Kids app. So for those younger kids, this is a great option. The content on YouTube Kids is highly curated, quality, educational, and parents have a high degree of control over being able to select specifically what channels, what creators, what videos their kids are allowed to access on that. And then as the kid gets older, enters those preteen, early teenage years, we do have supervised accounts similarly where parents can supervise their kids' YouTube accounts through Google Family Link and do things like set those app timers. And then for our older teens, we have experiences like restricted mode, where the account experience is very similar to what a young adult would experience. We just have that more mature content restricted so that they don't get exposed to stuff that they might not be quite ready for yet. So we try and calibrate some options and tools to kind of each developmental era that a kid is in.
Thank you. No?
So I don't want to echo everything that Alicia said. There are a lot of similarities across the platforms because, as we all know, this is all about risk mitigation, right? You have to get ahead of the risks, which is why we do a ton of proactive and preventative work. I think where we're situated, which is a little different, is that we have a number of apps at Meta. It's not just Instagram, which I know is the tip of the spear when it comes to youth experiences. And yes, Facebook. We were all laughing about X versus Facebook. There are teens on Facebook, but we have WhatsApp, we have our messaging services, we have our VR experience as well. And we've developed 50 plus tools, features, and a number of resources since I joined Meta about 2.5 years ago. We recently introduced teen accounts, which again is defaulting teens. And as Alicia said, we know parents are overwhelmed and not every family can get involved with their teens. So we default all teens into these experiences, and teens under 16 cannot relax those restrictions without their parents' consent. But what I want to focus on is education. And we have our family center. I always tout it whenever I speak because it has a number of articles that experts like Connect Safely and a number of others we work with day in, day out have written for parents and for teens. And I think that to get ahead of all these issues, educating teens and parents early on and often, especially Larry, you talked about changing technology when it comes to AI. It's really important for parents, myself involved. I'm a Luddite. It applies to me as well. Parents need to understand what the tools are so that they can educate their teens. And we've poured a ton of resources, energy, and time into that. today we just announced, I don't know if this is official, but I'm making it official here, that we partnered with Child Help to develop a curriculum that addresses sextortion. Specifically, it's on the rise, and people are really worried about it, myself included. And it's a curriculum that is there for schools to use, as well as parents to understand how to have these very sticky, uncomfortable conversations with their teens. And we actually start earlier. This is geared to middle schoolers. So the idea is we should be educating people on what the risks are. And of course, it's incumbent on industry to solve for it. We also need to have a dialogue with schools and with parents so that teens, and when they're even younger than teens, are prepared and they can use social media responsibly, because as you said, it's not going away. It is part and parcel. It's interchangeable with your lives, and we really need to start early and often.
Thank you. As someone member Hoover, I've watched the evolution of tech companies, and I have to say, there's plenty to criticize, but everything that these folks have said is true, and I've seen a tremendous amount of evolution over the period. But is it enough from your perspective as a legislature, or do you need to give them a little bit of help, so to speak, by putting laws in place that mandate these and perhaps other safeguards?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important we're striking the right balance, and that the government is figuring out where it should engage and where it shouldn't engage. And I think, one of the reasons that we crafted my bill the way we did is we didn't really overly prescribe how schools need to limit smartphone use. We simply required that school districts must have that conversation and pass a policy. So it gives every community the opportunity, the students, the parents, the teachers, the administrators, to really talk about what are the best times to restrict or limit smartphone use. What are the right times to allow it, right? With, for example, a teacher's permission, or in the case of an emergency. And so things like that. I think it's about finding the right balance. I do think there is a role for government to play in this, particularly in some of the debates we had. Actually, we were just talking at our table where, to be honest with you, when we debate bills that social media companies oppose in the legislature, oftentimes they're not bringing their own solutions. And I think that's what has been frustrating for lawmakers is, okay, you don't like this bill, that's fine, but what is your solution? And that's why I've actually really appreciated what Meta has done in terms of, these new 16-year-old kind of restrictions on Instagram. Not restrictions, it's probably a bad way to say it, but just this new awareness of young people under 16 and how that they should be treated somewhat differently on these platforms. So I've really appreciated to see that kind of actively from companies like Meta.
So Aleeza and Nate, they've been talking about essentially your generation. You guys are over 16, but still, you can remember not far ago when you were 13, 14 years old. How do you feel about this? Is this helping you? Is this patronizing you? I mean, where do you fit into, whether it's Meta or the state government putting restrictions or safeguards for young people? How do you guys feel about those?
Well, specifically about phones, I think as a high schooler, I would not have liked it personally, but my high school that I went to, they recently updated their phone restrictions, and from what I hear, it seems to be pretty effective. Although I do hear students getting around it. So while the youth perspective is definitely really important in this conversation, you do have to keep in mind that the youth can be pretty self-centered. Like personally in high school, I would not have liked the ban, but I do think it would be an effective tool. So I think there has to be a balance between hearing what the youth want to say about it, but also listening to people in the industry and lawmakers about these issues.
Yeah, so I'm actually 15, so I'm currently under like an Instagram teen account, and I feel like at first a lot of these restrictions, they feel like an incumbents. They feel like there's something that's interfering with our ability to enjoy the platforms. I've heard friends complain about getting the notification that they've been on the app for an hour. But something that I've noticed, at least in my case, is that while these notifications feel at first like they're interfering with our abilities to enjoy our social media experiences, knowing that I've been scrolling Instagram for an hour actually helps me get off the app and be more consciously aware of the amount of time that I'm spending on it. Getting the notification that I've been funneling too much time into my social media allows me to take a step back. And I feel like a lot of the benefits to these policies is not necessarily that they're restricting our experiences, but that they're making us more aware of what exactly we're doing and what we need to stop. And I think that policies that gear more towards making us aware of our online activity, as opposed to honing in on it and restricting it, are what I find to be more effective, at least in my case, for helping me create a more healthy relationship with my online activity.
Okay, so you just warmed my heart, and I want to introduce you to the product team that worked on this. This is exactly, and I know TikTok has a similar feature too. This is exactly what we want. We want to hear from teens, and we also want to know that, because we're always trying to improve upon what we do. Part of our work is iterating.
Yeah.
And when we get this feedback in real time that, yeah, it's annoying. And we know, like with teen accounts, we knew we might lose teens because they're frankly, they don't want to be told XYZ or be put in restrictive. And I think actually restrictions is the right word. These are restricted experiences, but it's also good to hear that it is actually having the effect of changing how you interact with our app. And that's the intended consequence that we want. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Nicole. So one of the things that I've noticed and I guess participated in as a person who's been around the social media world and the tech world for a very long time is that there's often competing pressures on tech companies. I mean, you've got groups like ours asking you to do one thing. You've got other groups asking you to do very different things. You've got parents making certain demands on you. You've got teens asking for different things. It does strike me that you guys are in a position where you have to balance so many concerns from so many constituencies. And I'm not trying to get political here because I know that there's a tinge of that going on right now, but just in broad in general, even going back to 20 years ago. I mean, how do you deal with all the different pressures on you from all sides, including from folks like Assemblyman Hoover, who I'm sure putting some pressures on you as well, and Connect Safely. We bug you guys sometimes.
Sure, although usually nicely.
Yeah, nicely, but
I think, there's like a great challenge and there's a great challenge and a great honor in these kinds of jobs in that you are really kind of at the center of a lot of different debates and discussions and perspectives. And our jobs, I know we all have slightly different jobs, but I think a common theme is we have to try to like take in all those different inputs and come up with solutions that sometimes are the least worst option and sometimes are the best option. And I think that, in a way, I feel so lucky to be in this kind of role at this moment where we're having so many, I think, really timely conversations around the role that social media and technology in general should play in young people's lives. So it's uncomfortable sometimes, but also an honor. I would say one thing is that sometimes when you are within the tech company, you can sometimes see a little bit about how things that people are suggesting may not be like possible given the way technology works, or B, may actually have consequences that may like run counter to the goal that the person, be it a policymaker or be it an NGO or be it a parent, are kind of like trying to get. So I think one thing that is, I think, often helpful is to have those constructive conversations that are rooted in, yeah, we have really shared goals here around giving young people safer and more enriching and also more kind of like mindful and reasonable relationships with tech. And sometimes we actually have insights from a tech company perspective about how to get to that goal that may not have been discussed or may not have been thought of, or actually have kind of constructive feedback to say, I see where you're going with this idea. Let me walk you through how this looks from a product design perspective, from a machine learning perspective, from what we know about user experience. And not to say that this solution is the right one, but to make sure that everybody has sort of that nuance of information and discussion to be able to bring all of our like collective expertise to the table. So it is very much a negotiation. And sometimes it's so fascinating and wonderful. Sometimes it can be contentious. But overall, I find it like a really just kind of fascinating experience to be able to be brokering some of those.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think I can say it any better than that. But I think my perspective in terms of how to kind of balance all of these interests and take in all of these different stakeholder perspectives is that as a product, you really want to start from a base of having a strong set of operating principles, being transparent about what those operating principles are so that we're kind of starting from the same place in a conversation, and then just being open to any and all perspectives and feedback, because all of that is helpful for us to figure out how to enrich the user experience and to improve safety throughout our products. So I think those are the foundational kind of stepstones to getting to a good place. There are a lot of different interesting perspectives in this space, but I do still firmly believe that win-win solutions are always possible in terms of delivering great products to younger users and doing it in a way that addresses the major concerns and legitimate concerns that folks have across the board, whether that's parents, teachers, kid, industry stakeholders, so on and so forth.
Nicole, do you want any comments?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking and laughing to myself because I think it just really depends. It depends on what the issue is. But my thinking always is you've got to be flexible, you've got to be opportunistic, and you have to know when to leverage the right people in the right way. And so it's about paying attention to the dynamics. Like Alicia said, it's how the sausage is made and when to insert yourself, when to advocate, when to know when to stop. It's very fluid. And so I don't think there's like an easy answer to it. I think it just really depends on the circumstances. But understanding what the goal is, how to get there, when to insert yourself, who to bring in and when is really important to making sure. And also advocating sometimes angers people, right? Like when you advocate and you're trying to push for your position, especially when it comes to youth safety, people don't always like that. And so you have to kind of figure out a way to do it that doesn't necessarily alienate people, but brings them along for the ride so that they understand where you're coming from, what perspectives you're bringing in, and why your voice matters. So I think that is really, really important when you're in roles like ours that are incredibly cross-functional and you have so many competing interests.
Thank you so much. So I want to ask a question of Nate and Aleeza. There's a tendency among people to stereotype groups, and I think that's always a mistake. And I've learned that with young people, stereotypes mean nothing. So I'd like you to tell me a little bit about the diversity of thought among your peers, perhaps fellow members of your advisory councils. I know, Nate, we've had some debates on our council and we don't all agree. But, give us a sense of the breadth of conversation that's going on, ranging from, we need strong controls to, keep the government and industry out of it. We want 100% free speech or whatever. I mean, I'd just like to hear a little bit about some of the discussions that you're having.
Yeah. So one of, I think, the major sources of the way that I think is that I'm a debate kid. So on my team, we do a lot of discussion about policy, especially as it pertains to the online world, because this is something that affects so many aspects of who we are. And I think one thing that I love about debate is it lets me explore both sides. I've looked at Section 230, which is one of the key pieces of legislation when it comes to the restriction of social media. And I've seen that I've explored both sides of that, the sides of companies that want to maintain their own legal immunity and legislators who want to see more action taken from companies. And I feel like, at least in the spaces that I inhibit, you really see the complete range of opinions on this because all of us have explored both sides of that equation. But I feel like a lot of the kids my age outside of those spaces haven't really taken the time to consider the larger implications of the restriction or freedom to use social media. So I think that what's really important is making kids aware, because a lot of my peers have considered these things in depth, but I know that the general teenage population hasn't. And so if you were to take the time to explain the reasons for the restrictions on teen accounts, a lot of them would have a better understanding and be more able to thoughtfully interact with these restrictions, as opposed to when they're simply told, well, you're in Australia, you're under 16, you can't have this account. And I think that it's when we cultivate that awareness that we really see more full-fledged thought and useful interaction come to light. But I think that in general, the average teenager, if you tell them, we're not letting you use a phone on school campus, or you're not allowed to be on a social media platform for more than an hour, which isn't a policy that, as far as I'm aware, exists, but it could. A lot of them are going to see these restrictions and they're going to immediately and flat out reject them, say that, do their best to bypass them. I think cultivating awareness is the key issue when it comes to the question of restricting social media on the teen end.
Thank you.
Yeah, so in my own personal experiences with Connect Safely Advisory Council, there's just been so many good conversations we've had about issues from AI to free speech. So I'll give you one example. In one of our last conversations, we talked about the new restrictions on free speech across the industry, and what our general thoughts were. And I thought it was really interesting because I came in with my own thoughts that I had pretty strong convictions in them. And through that conversation, I learned from a couple of the other members who have had different experiences and have different focuses in their academic careers, but in their personal lives, completely different perspectives. And I thought it was just such a unique opportunity. I don't know if the general population, like you said, is really aware enough to have these pretty nuanced conversations. So I do think continuing to have these youth advisories is such a great place to have these conversations. Another conversation we had was really just had great diversity of opinions was about AI and its future in education. And I think I just think having these conversations in maybe these smaller groups is such a great place. Without really widespread awareness, it's gonna be hard to really get like a good nuanced conversation between these people.
Thank you. So I have one last question. It's an easy one. What do you look forward to when you start your workday, school day? You know, when you get up in the morning, you get to work, what do you look forward to? You go down the row.
So much. I think I haven't mentioned our youth council too much, but one thing I really love is getting readouts from our discussions and planning for those discussions. So we have this group of young people, 15 young people from around the world, and we take decisions that we're grappling with in terms of product implementation, how we should write policies, and we, have these regular meetings with this like really diverse group of young people. So one thing I just really look forward to is either getting to plan or hear readouts from that group and really like figure out how we can implement some of the feedback that we get from young people. I think that's such a fun part of my day.
Yeah, for me, I look forward to connecting with my colleagues every day, whether that's virtually or in person in our office. I really love a collaborative workspace, and nobody's better at that than Google. So it's really great to be able to work with folks who are so smart on building these products and maintaining them and navigating the public policy space. And then also I love grabbing a latte from the Google Cafe before I go through my morning emails. So that's also great.
I'll start with on the home front. I look forward to cuddles with my kids first thing in the morning. And then when I go into work, I am mission driven. I never thought I would land at Meta until 2.5 years ago. And so what I look forward to is progress. Every day I expect to see progress. Sometimes we slide back, but I expect we go forward. And that's what keeps me ticking and what keeps me excited about my role.
For me, I'd say that it's really learning and building connections. I think that really the key part of my day is getting to talk to people. So talk to my friends, learn from my teachers. I think that really what I thrive on is exchange of opinions. So I love getting to have different conversations every day, interact with my friends at lunch, or learn from different people at the meetings that I have to go to. I think that that's really the key part of my day, and it's what keeps me getting up.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I want to thank our panel, but we're not quite done.
Nate.
Oh, Nate, I'm sorry, Nate.
No,
Oh,
it's okay. One of the last things I just feel so lucky to go to the school that I go to. I think it's such a unique place, and it just has such a I go to Berkeley, and it's just such a unique place. Everyone has such a unique character about them, and I'm very similar. I also really just enjoy talking to people. And there's just never a shortage of interesting thought or a strange perspective that you just come across at Berkeley. And so it's just kind of like you never know what you're gonna get every day. So it's just really exciting.
Great. Thank you so much. And we have some time for questions and answers. So feel free to raise a question. And don't be shy. It always takes somebody to start. You get an extra bonus point. In fact, you get an extra piece of swag if you're the first person to ask a question. There we go. The swag winner.
Wait. I want you to hear me, boy.
Hi, my name's Nachara. So nice to meet you all. I don't want to mispronounce your name, but the Meta representative, I have a question for you. When you were making the switch from law to working with Meta, what was that like?
My career path is not linear, honestly. We can have a longer chat about it. But I started out at a big firm doing civil litigation. Then I was a prosecutor for almost 9 years, went back into civil litigation, hated it. We can talk about that. And then I pivoted to tech. And I'm going to be real clear. I thought I wanted to be a real estate agent at one point. I thought I might become a public defender. I thought I might become an U.S. attorney, a USA. And then I met somebody. And this is where the power of relationships come in. Be open to meeting people, because I met somebody who took a chance on me. He happened to be very connected in Silicon Valley. He picked me, brought me into tech, and he changed my life. His name is Mike Brown. And because of him, I was able to move into tech. But it's been, a steep learning curve, starting out in smaller tech companies, which are crazy, and going to a huge behemoth company like Meta was a shift for me. And again, longer conversation, but it was, a learning curve that challenged me in ways. And I would also say that, like Alicia, who came from academia, and other people who are experts in their fields can easily move into tech. And just because you've been in tech for 10, 15, 20 years doesn't mean you're better at it or better suited for it than people who come from academia, from being a lawyer, it's a place where anybody can thrive. So, if that's something that you want to pursue down the road, be open, meet people, don't give up, and you will find your way into that work.
Thank you.
We have time for one or two more questions. Yes, back there. Much time do we have?
Hi, my name is Timothy. Thank you for this really inspiring conversation. It's been really cool seeing youth perspectives being brought to the table. So my question is to the social media representatives, what are other ways besides conversations like these that y'all use to engage youth when making new initiatives, policies, or things like that?
I can start because I know Alicia talked about the teen council. We don't have a teen council like TikTok does, but we do a number of other things. First, user research is a critical tool that we rely on, and we bring teens in. So for example, with teen accounts, we worked hand in hand with teens to understand what they wanted and what mitigations would work for them, as well as meeting with a lot of parents and experts as well. But that's one way, is through user research. We also work with the TTC labs, Trust, Transparency, and Control Labs, and you should check out their website. We've been working with them for over a decade, but we do prototyping and co-design where we bring teens together and they inform a lot of the product decisions that we make in a hands-on way, meaning they're playing around, they're giving us feedback in real time to help us assess and evaluate what the product experience should look like. And then we also meet with teen groups that are connected to a lot of the experts or people we work with. So we will meet with the AAP Teens Council. We will meet with the Digital Wellness Labs Teen Council. So we use teens at different points depending on what the needs are. But bottom line, teen voices matter, as do parent voices, guardian voices, expert voices. And it is, back to Larry's original point, a juggling act. But you have to hear from all sides in order to really design the right mitigations and a product that sticks.
Thanks. We have time for a very quick question and very quick answer. Go ahead.
So hi, my name is Maya. I'm the executive director for the Bay Area Urban Debate League. So my job is we teach kids how to use policy debate throughout the Bay Area, and especially in schools that wouldn't traditionally have debate teams. With that being said, when y'all opened this conversation up, you stated about how you guys were trying to bring awareness around exploitation and trafficking. And being that y'all are in the Bay, which is one of the biggest sex trafficking hubs, how are y'all talking to Black and brown boys and girls about the experiences and things they should know directly? And when I say that, I know you guys said, well, there's stuff on the website. That's not always accessible. I mean, even today, trying to scan the QR code, everybody can't scan it. So how are you making sure, like I tell my students, if it's convenient for you, it's probably wrong for somebody else?
Yeah, I can take this one on because I did raise the exploitation. So we just launched the curriculum today, so I can get back to you in terms of what it looks like in terms of interacting with local communities. I also, again, I was a prosecutor in Cocoa County in San Francisco, and I worked on child exploitation cases. So I know the landscape and I hear you loud and clear. One of the things that we do in my team, I'm not specifically on the child exploitation team, but it's an adjacent team to me. But I think that the in-person education and involving industry, bringing industry to schools, finding ways for teens to hear from companies and to listen to teens in terms of what you just said, what is right, what is going to work, what isn't going to work is really important. So we look for opportunities to have those dialogues. We do have teams within Meta who do a lot of the reach outs, whether it's local or on a national level or globally. And I'm happy to find out if there's somebody specific who we could send to work with your debating organization. Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe
Yeah,
offer
quickly,
one more thing. I think there's so much strength in these partnerships between tech companies, organizations like the PTA, organizations that work kind of in schools and directly with young people. In some ways, I don't know that it's right for tech companies to sort of show up in all those spaces, but I think we can provide resources and support and partnerships to do that. But I think one of the really powerful things about working in a tech company is that you have your product. I mean, that's where young people are also engaging is in the product itself. And so whether it's things like, we block the sending and receiving of nudity and direct messages for under 18s, for example, things like that where, using our creators and using people who are like, voices that are popular on the platform. Actually, Matt over in the corner when he was at TikTok, did a number of great kind of collaborations with creators on YouTube to do PSAs around media literacy and mindful tech use. And it shows up right in the feed. So the idea is that, it's true that sometimes standalone resources can struggle to get in front of the people who can most make use of them, although they also have the opportunity to have more information and, that you can kind of get in like a 60-second video or like a quick tip in a product. But I do think that that's a great opportunity for a lot of our platforms in partnership with experts, in partnership with young people. Actually, I've just been working with our youth council on some new educational notices and DMs, which will, be continuing to iterate in the coming months. And I think that's where, some of those young people who won't necessarily engage in a formal program, but will get that kind of what we sometimes call just-in-time education as they're using the product itself. Sometimes that can be the most impactful.
And I'll just flag one more thing that YouTube does as well, kind of on the other side of that coin about having community involvement and the expertise of local communities and groups in flagging harmful content and making sure that harmful messages aren't spreading on our platform. So we have what's called the Priority Flagger program. And so we partner with a number of local NGOs, government agencies, all levels of government in the US and across the globe, who are really great at identifying harmful content that violates our community guidelines in their communities. And they kind of have a streamlined pathway to alert us to that so that we can take action quicker and better understand where we're seeing issues with content on the platform.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that question. Connect Safely has a number of materials that cover some of those areas, and we would be delighted to work with your organization and others to get more of a community access. So thank you. I want to thank our great panel. I really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.